Right, we've got a quorum, and welcome back. I am after expert advice from two GMs. I am happily withdrawing my amendment.
You're asking Chris?
Yes, I am.
She didn't say my name. She didn't say my name, Gary.
Things have plummeted.
She said two. But
So we have a motion on the board, Councillor Forsyth and Her Worship the Mayor. So we're going to enter into debate. Councillor Forsyth, would you like to speak to your motion?
No.
Her Worship the Mayor?
I'm happy to support this motion. I just want to make a few comments about it. In 2008, the council signed a memorandum with...
Sorry, Your Worship, can we have quiet, please?
Yeah, there is a lot of noise.
Thank you.
In 2008, the council signed a memorandum with the Waikato Regional Council in relation to stormwater systems, and one of the things it does say in there is that we will put in place a stormwater bylaw to, to support what we're trying to do with our stormwater system across the city. So I'm really pleased to see that 7 years later we're doing that. That's good. Thank you, Chris, for that. Really quick to get on with. I think it's about time that we do send a message to the public about how important the water systems are, and this bylaw is about that. And I'm hoping that we're going to generate a bit of interest about what happens to stormwater systems and water systems across the city with this bylaw in a communication sense, because I think it's got some value. And that's part of the education process and part of people being aware of how the systems work in the city. The other comment I want to make is about consultation and engagement. So, number one, I'm really pleased that the staff have embraced the significance and engagement policy and are looking at different ways to do things. So thank you very much for that. I do want to acknowledge Councillor O'Leary's now not proceeding amendment, because I understand what is behind that, and I'm actually really supportive of that. What we're trying to do is to talk to people about the things we want to do in the city before we actually put pen to paper, and talk about what affects them most and how we can reflect that in the documents that we prepare. So I think this process is an example of that, and I'm pleased to see that, and I'm hoping that over time we are going to move to a situation where we do that. We draft the bylaw and we actually pass it without needing to go back out again. But I think that might be a step too far in this case. I think it is important that at least we take the time to let the public know about stormwater systems and about this bylaw, because it does have a punitive aspect to it, and give the public an opportunity to give some comments on it. So I think the engagement process is right in this case, and I think it's a good starting step to how we are going to do things in the future, and I'm really happy about that. And I do think, I guess the final comment I want to make is I do feel that the way we write these bylaws and the language we use needs major overhaul. I think it could be said far simpler, far shorter, and in language that is far more modern. And I'm really hoping that we move to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher?
Yeah, thank you. I obviously take a very different view to Her Worship the Mayor. And yes, you do go out and talk to stakeholders and people you think are affected and get expertise. But while I'm on this council, even if I'm only in a minority of one, I will resolutely defend the right of citizens of this city to have a say in as much of our decision-making as is possible. And one of those issues is if you do a bylaw, you are no different to the Parliament of New Zealand. And if you propose a law, it goes to a select committee, even though you have done a pre-piece of work around consultation, departmental officials, federated farmers, key stakeholder groups, but ultimately, the ordinary family that lives in Taihape or West Coast, or the family that lives in Dinsdale or Hillcrest, if they're so interested and so concerned, get to have a say at the end of that. So I'm not going to ever divert from that principle. I'm also going to ensure that, notwithstanding we talk about online consultation, there are still a range of people for various reasons who are not in the IT sort of loop, and obviously that's where the Good City News has a process. To be honest, quite frankly, Madam Chair, I was very surprised at your amendment, and I'm very delighted that staff reminds us of the law of this country. And I was around the Local Government Act. I helped on a select committee reviewing that act and all relevant acts, and I can tell you the intent of the Parliament is to ensure that we maximise public participation, not just for the privileged and the few, for the people who we think are experts, that for ordinary people, ultimately they get a chance. Whether they take it or not is irrelevant. The issue is they have the opportunity. Personally, I think the 4 weeks is too short, but I'm going to assume, and I now just have a question to the General Manager. Obviously,
We're in debate, not questions, unless it's a process question.
well, that's fine. I'll carry on. So I'll make a statement that I'm not necessarily happy about the 4 weeks. I think it's quite short, but that's cool. I'm going to make an assumption, even though the resolution talks about an online submission process, that anyone wants to sort of write a letter and put it in New Zealand Post on the 3 days a week that they collect mail these days will do that, and anyone who wants to engage with staff will do that so that they're also in the loop. And I've got an assumption that through our Hamilton News, through our news thing that we have, and I see nodding heads, that's good, there'll be notice that there will be an opportunity. That's fine. I'll be supporting the motion.
Councillor Mallett.
Just a
Debate?
point of clarification. Presumably your amendment has been struck down because it couldn't be done.
No, I withdrew my amendment.
Oh, okay.
Any further debate? Councillor King?
Staff have indicated that no one is dumping contaminants to dispose of them. The business that accidentally spills is liable for the clean-up, and we appear to be able to trace it back and find out who it is. I won't be supporting this motion. I believe it's using more staff time, it's more red tape, and it's more cost to the ratepayers in the end. And I believe with time, with bylaw on bylaw on bylaw, this adds up to make the city hard to live in, not easier to live in.
Thank you. Councillor Forsyth, would you like to use your right of reply?
Oh, just briefly, I think that a bylaw, the city reaches a certain mass and scale. The city's growing, one of the largest growing in New Zealand, and I think there comes a point arrives when we need to be proactive rather than reactive. I think this is a good position to be taking, and the reason I think I explained it earlier, the reason that I wanted G to be in there is because I think this is a process where education as well as the punitive type style of a bylaw go hand in hand, so that one is enhancing the other, and particularly when we're at the starting stages of a new bylaw, I think that education is really important. That's all.
Okay, thank you. So we've got the motion on the board there. All those in favour? Aye. And those against? Okay, that's been carried. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Right, item number 13, page 185. Proposed dog control policy and dog control bylaw, statement of proposal. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Yes,
Can
Madam Chair,
take the
statement of
report as read.
proposal, yeah, it's already
pretty straightforward, I think, to go out for consultation through the special consultative process. There's been some key stakeholder consultation with the groups that you'll be aware of, and relatively minor changes. The bylaw has done good service, I guess, to the community, and with a few small amendments to go out and seek public
Madam
consultation.
Chair, I'll move.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Just a question, can we, and this may be for democracy, does the whole committee have to hear the hearings on this, or can we use the elected members from the dog working group? And can we just add that to the resolution, that they hear the submissions? 'Cause
I'm not 100% sure, Madam Chair. Liz may be able to advise.
Hi Liz, can you answer that question? I think I know the answer.
The traffic bylaw also went through SCP and we were able to use a smaller committee, so as long as we follow the same process.
Okay.
With the chair then reporting back to this committee and with all the information available to this committee, then we should be able to use that process. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just further to that point, through the chair, I guess the question is if you want the working party to hear the submitters and to also whether to deliberate and make a recommendation back to the committee. That all needs to be contained in the resolution that we pass here.
Yep.
Obviously, all councillors would need to familiarise themselves with the material, so when it came back to this committee, you were still voting on that, but that would need to be covered.
Okay, so I just wonder, Councillor Wilson, I'd like to second your motion if you were happy to include that. While we're having further questions, perhaps Democracy can find the resolution that we did for the traffic and pull it up. Does that work for you?
Works for me.
It works for you? Great. So, Democracy Manager, if you can work on that. So we'll carry on with questions. We have a motion on the table. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. On page 186.14, just some clarity, please. The end of the sentence says, has shown a few issues with the current bylaw and policy, other than the need for a more planned approach to off-leash dog exercise areas. Can you just expand on what that means?
I can't, but I'm sure someone behind me can.
Liz?
I mean, it might not mean much at all.
Yep, so we came back to committee last year with the dog plan, the dog park plan, and that was response to when we went out to talk to key stakeholders about the policy and the bylaw. They didn't have very many issues at all with the policy and the bylaw itself, but what the policy and bylaw do is they state the dog exercise areas, and that was where we started the conversation of there's not enough areas and there's not enough provision. And so that went from the bylaw and policy conversation to the dog plan, and then that's come full circle and fed back into the...
So it would be more accurate to say that other than the need for a few more off-leash dog areas. Okay. Thank you. Page 187, there's 3 bullet points at the top, and these are a list of people who have been consulted. There's a Maori group there. Well, I assume that's a Maori group. What's the rationale? I mean, the others are clearly dog-related or pet-related. What's that group?
We have, under the Local Government Act, we have to consult with Māori, and we consult with that group on every bylaw. So you'll see...
So it's not a
T-Hawk come
group of Maori dog owners, I think. Who is it?
No, you'll see T-Hawk
Never done
come
it.
up.
Something Hamilton.
So what we do is we go to T-Hawk on each bylaw, we present them the bylaw and say, do you want to come back to us with anything?
Okay.
If they're interested, they do, and if they're not, they don't.
Okay. And this might, I think I know what the maps starting from 203 going forward for a wee while. Part 1 are areas that are where there are already dog off-leash parks and or where we are going to add additional ones. The problem is that the colouring in the maps becomes a bit discoloured halfway through. And then part 2 is new areas where we're going to ban dogs. Is that right? Or areas where we currently are banning dogs.
Councillor Mallett, if I can help here, these maps are exactly the same maps as are in the plan, the doggy plan that we adopted last year. So they are better colour in here, but They're exactly the same.
Okay, I don't have that there. So these are, so for example, from page 115 through, 115 through 116, those are areas that currently have no status but are going to go to banned dogs, dogs banned.
The majority of them already have dogs banned from them.
Have what?
The majority of those areas already
Have dog
bans, so that you're not allowed to exercise dogs within them. Sorry, my copy is black and white, so I'm reading more copies.
Yeah, okay. So are we adding any additional no dog areas or dog banned areas?
Under the work that we did under the dog exercise area plan last year, no. What we have done is just refine those areas to fit those locations. So an example at Hamilton Gardens is that the whole Hamilton East Cemetery area is banned for dog exercises because it's a cemetery. So no, they're as we have them now.
So does that include leash dogs too, or is it only unleashed dogs?
So no, when it's an exclusion area, it's no dogs are allowed
No
in
dogs,
that site.
Right, any further questions? Your Worship?
I just wanted to check on special consultative procedure. So, just quickly been looking at the legislation. So the Animal Control Act requires special consultative procedure for a bylaw.
For the policy.
Okay, and it does, and that's not subject to the amendments to the Local Government Act about choice under the significance and engagement policy in terms of special consultative procedure?
No, it just states that we must use the special consultative procedure.
Right, okay.
Oh, this is the happening thing.
All right, thanks.
Right. Thank you. If there are no further questions, democracy, question, Councillor Gallagher?
I'm just wanting to see the amended resolution
Well,
up
yes,
on
that's
the motion
coming.
up on the board, you know, with the
Yep,
with the process of a subcommittee.
That's exactly
and
what's
looking back.
coming now.
Yeah.
So that's been moved by Councillor Wilson and seconded by myself.
Who is on the group?
Councillor Tooman was the chair, and myself and the deputy mayor.
Thank you.
I think that was all, wasn't it?
So through the chair, you've proposed just putting those three onto the.
Yes, yeah, and I would propose Councillor Tooman continue and chair those hearings if he's happy to do that. Yeah. We're very high-tech here, aren't we? We're very high-tech.
Chair, is it appropriate that during this process, if this motion gets passed, that some attention is given to the plain language wording and the way the sentences are constructed? Because it doesn't change the meaning or intent, it's the way it's written.
I'll certainly take that up with the staff.
Thank you.
A, B, C, D, E, F. A new subcommittee to be established to hear submissions, deliberate and make recommendations to the Strategy and Policy Committee on the matters consulted on in the draft statement of proposal, yada, 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 and propose, and let the subcommittee be established at the completion of this hearing process. Do we need that? We don't need that. Can you just take...
We've
sorry,
had that- we've had
Councillor
that.
Wilson, I'm editing for you.
We have had that last sentence in previous ones too.
No, you've got it at the beginning. A subcommittee to be established, and then you had in a subcommittee to be established.
No, it was to be disestablished, I think it was.
Deborah, but
Yeah, that's it, disestablished.
Oh, was
last
it?
sentence, yeah.
It was to be disestablished.
You didn't see the dis.
I didn't see the pardon. There we go.
Yeah, so
All right.
just puts it,
Okay,
and just through the chair, we just need to have the names of the members of the subcommittee.
so that would be councillor, chaired by Councillor Tooman, or the subcommittee members be, well, you know, Councillor Tooman, chair, deputy mayor,
You have to be the boss, don't you?
and myself. Tooman, chair, Testament O'Leary. Good. Yep. Okay, so that's the motion by Councillor Wilson, seconded by myself. Is there any debate? Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, thank you, and I certainly agree with Her Worship's point around the need for us to be continuing to focus around plain English and easy to find your way around a bylaw and all of that stuff. I think is absolutely important, and I think this process is a good process to go through, and it again, stating the obvious, it's a bit like the Parliament, which has select committees to hear laws, and then the select committee refers back to the whole of the Parliament. And obviously, I'm sure that Councillors Tooman, Chesterman, O'Leary will be absolutely on top of this issue and will thoroughly value their work, and I value their work on this group. I have, as I've expressed to you, I have one or two reservations in terms of some of the areas, but I think the only thing I would say is that clearly the submission process gives an opportunity for any of that to be teased out from local neighbourhoods and residents and that kind of thing. And also, I guess I just make an observation that in the end, I hope we have sufficient flexibility. If any part of this bylaw or one of the zones is not working as we intended, then we can be quite rapid in making those incremental changes. But I compliment the Chair and other councillors, particularly you with your interest in this area, Councillor O'Leary, and the staff for the work that we're at. And you go to Australia, you see it sort of kind of works, you know, really interesting stuff there, so I think we're moving to there. Yes, so I will be supporting this, notwithstanding one or two reservations as to a couple of specific localities.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Any further debate? Right, I'll put that vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
I haven't finished yet.
Oh, you haven't finished. Did you say Your Honour?
No, not yet.
Right, we're moving to...
chairmanship.
I think that's way above my pay grade.
Please do not inflate a reg.
Item 14, page 219, open air burning bylaw, the final step in this as well, and just want to acknowledge the fire service in the audience today.
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, excellent, and I'm happy to second that one. Oh, Councillor Matthew Pascoe, I'll let you second that one. Right, take the report as read. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor King?
Under clause 5.1D in the
What
proposed
page?
bylaw,
What page are you on?
226. So it says, no person shall light any fire at any time in the open air within a barbecue, brazier or incinerator or a traditional cooking fire. And then D is in breach of any act or regulation, including any rule in a district or regional plan under the Resource Management Act 1991. Does the regional plan take precedence over our district plan? Brian, it's probably a question to you.
Look, I wouldn't have thought so at all in terms of this level of detail. It would be in relation to probably a nuisance, like an environmental nuisance. Under the Resource Management Act, you can't actually create a nuisance impact. The threshold under the Act is fairly high, and that would be the test that would be applied there, I would imagine. The Regional Council would apply at more of a policy level, I imagine, on a case-by-case basis.
My question is does the regional plan take precedence over the district plan?
Sorry. Look, this is sorry, Councillor King, to interrupt. This is a slightly new process because we've combined these two reports. So like we did the previous one, we have to show, and the minutes need to reflect that we do deliberate and then do follow with your questions. So I just wanted deliberation is around questions from the hearing. So in any of the issues and items that were raised in the hearing through the submission. So if we can just, if there are no questions, I'm happy to move straight to part 2, but we need to show that we have actually deliberated. So if there are any questions on the issues and options in part 1 of the report, which is on page 220. I see the staff are, after the submissions, you're only recommending slight changes to the what was proposed. Councillor King, do you have any questions on any of the points raised in the submission? No, okay. All right, so look, doesn't appear to be any questions around that, so we can continue with the questions on the recommendation. So Councillor King, if you'd like to continue.
Okay, I'll change my question for now. Does central government legislation take precedence over the regional policy?
In a strict hierarchical sense, yes, but they do tend to, in practice, all operate together.
So does the regional plan take precedence over the district plan?
Look, my answer to that would be no. And when you're talking about the regional plan, perhaps you could be a bit more specific. What regional plan are you referring to? Because there are numerous regional plans.
Okay, where I'm heading here is why is 5.1D in this bylaw? I can't see why it needs to be here.
I just asked Peter to help us with this answer.
In terms of clause 5.1, it specifies the...
5.1D.
Oh, sorry, 5.1D.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's to capture any requirement in the district or regional plan that relates to burning, holding a fire, as well as the bylaw. For example, in the regional plan, there is a rule in there which prohibits the burning of certain materials, and they are materials which, if burnt, for example, plastics, tyres, etc., would emit toxic pollutants into the atmosphere. So that's to capture that side of things as well. So if the authorised officer is following up a complaint in relation to a fire anywhere in Hamilton, if they see that the person is burning prohibited materials, they can take action under the bylaw.
Thank you.
But doesn't the regional, the outdoor burning regional council bylaw stand on its own? And shouldn't they be enforcing their own bylaw? And why should our council be spending our time, energy and money enforcing somebody else's bylaw, somebody else's policy? And where I'm heading here is why are we putting 5.1D in the policy when it's somebody else's responsibility?
We have discussed this in previous meetings, and an officer of the regional council is also authorised under this bylaw to act. I think we had somebody here from the regional council explaining that in order for them to issue an abatement notice under the Resource Management Act, the situation would have to be at a high threshold before they can act. So this bylaw introduces a lower threshold whereby an authorised officer can take action without having to revert to an abatement notice.
This bylaw says nothing about burning plastics and things like that you're referring to here. What D is saying is any central government legislation or any regional legislation will pick up and will enforce. It's their job to do that. This bylaw is quite clear about what it does, and then you've got this wide-reaching D in here to capture anything else that's outside of our jurisdiction or outside of our area. I don't see why it's there. And why are we spending our money, our time, and our resources enforcing something that under somebody else's legislation?
So, Councillor King, I think that's been asked and answered several times. I'm not sure that there's going to be any different answer forthcoming. So, you might want to leave those comments for debate. Do you have further questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Clause 7.4. So clause 7.4 says the council may, the second part of it, the council may recover any costs incurred in extinguishing fires from the person to whom the direction was made. And then directly under that in the notes it says the function of extinguishing fires under 7.2 is delegated to the New Zealand Fire Service. Now, the New Zealand Fire Service has said several times on the lead up to this, and I'll quote from Mr. Breeze, there is no financial incentive, he said. None of the changes proposed would be payable to the fire service, and the situation in terms of our response would be utterly unchangeable by this bylaw. And then somebody else who I understand is from the fire service, Ron Devlin, said the fire service cannot recover costs in attending fires within the urban fire district. So why is this clause 7.4 in the bylaw?
Okay, at any one time we may come across a situation where we need assistance to extinguish the fire, and an example I can think of is a vegetation clearance with a large, when they're doing a subdivision, preparing for subdivision, they'll do a lot of earth moving work, scrape up all the vegetation and then just torch it. Sometimes the fire service cannot gain access to those fires because they're in a remote paddock, for example. So an alternative would be to get some form of heavy machinery to just knock over the fire and spread out the base, put it out. And there can be a cost incurred with that if you have to hire such a piece of machinery.
It clearly says here that the function of extinguishing fires under 7.2 is delegated to the New Zealand Fire Service. It's their job to bring other people in to help. And then the fire service has clearly said that they can't recover costs.
Can I just follow on from that question? In 7.4, it does say the council may recover costs. So what costs would we be recovering?
Well, that's what I was really
What you were
talking
just,
about,
you're giving us
example
an
I just gave.
example.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yep. Okay.
It says in the same sentence, the council may recover any costs incurred in extinguishing fires, and directly under it, it says the function of extinguishing fires is delegated to the New Zealand Fire Service.
So what's your question that you're directing to staff?
I'd like to move an amendment to the motion to exclude clauses 5.1D and clause 7.4. I don't think they're relevant.
So you're going to have to, so you're putting forward an amendment. What is that amendment again, please? I can't put forward an amendment unless I'm clear on what it is.
So the amendment would be to remove clauses 5.1D and clause 7.4.
From the proposed bylaw.
Well, it will go directly below the motion, so I think that speaks for itself.
All right. So look, that, Your Worship?
I've got questions.
Yeah, I'll get to those. All right, so look, we are still in question time, so I'm going to do that as a foreshadowed amendment, Councillor King, and I will come back to you. Your Worship, question?
And just on page 225, are authorising officer and enforcement officer the same thing?
They are slightly different. An enforcement officer is one who is warranted under the Local Government Act, such as City Council officers and regional council officers.
Right.
An authorised officer is anybody else that that can act under the bylaw by reason of what it says in the bylaw. For example, the New Zealand Fire Service.
So in the definition of authorised officer, does it need to remove the reference to council staff? It says officer of council, which is archaic wording, but I think it means council staff. I'm just trying to avoid confusion. So I'm not sure if that needs tidying up, because then in the body of the bylaw, it does refer to enforcement officers pretty much mostly, except in 9.3 it talks about an authorised officer. So I'm just asking for clarity. I don't have the answer, but I think it's quite important. That's number one. Number 2, I see that property's been replaced with premises, which sounds like a good idea, but not all of the reference to property in the bylaw has been removed. So I'm not sure whether that's deliberate or that just needs to be tidied up, might need to be tidied up.
I think it's just a
Tidy up, okay. Do the notes form part of the bylaw, as in part of the, if you like, enforcement wording, where it's got note?
No, they're just for informative purposes only, but they must relate to
Yes.
one of the clauses in the bylaw.
Right, okay, so I have a little bit of a concern then about what's in some of the notes, because I think they probably should be in the clauses, because again, they give clarity. I understand the value of notes because they give a good guidance, but I'm a little bit concerned that some of those notes should be in the clauses.
These notes do form part of the bylaw because they don't specifically say this note does not form part of the bylaw.
So maybe you need to say the note does form part of the bylaw then, because I'm just worried about have you actioned under a note? There could be some ambiguity, which would be good. Okay. So I know they sound a bit picky, but I'm actually worried that some of the language might need to be tightened up. Now, does it come through to the council?
Yes, it will.
So again, it doesn't change the meaning of it, putting aside my views about clarity of wording, but I think those things do need to be tidied up.
So that they can be tidied up and then, brought back to the next council meeting, which is in
2 weeks.
2 days.
Thursday. The council meeting is on Thursday.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is coming through to that. Is it coming through?
The intention was that the recommendations from today would be circulated to members tomorrow.
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah. Right. Other questions? Any further questions? Councillor Mallett?
Thank you, Angela.
Madam Chair, thank you. I call you Councillor Mallett, so you can call me Madam Chair.
Thanks, babe. We have there's a definition on page 226, traditional cooking fire. What's the significance of that? I do remember it coming up during the thing, but I can't remember why we ended up defining it, separating it out.
Hangi, logo.
Yeah, I can see that, but what's the significance of it? Yeah, I know what it means. Well, I assume I know what it means. It could mean
In
lots.
the last, when it came through to council,
Yep.
we were asked whether we could remove using traditional cooking methods. So that was removed. However, that then causes confusion when you come down to clause where we talk about the distance between the property and 5.2, where you talk about the distance between the property and either the barbecue or the traditional cooking method, because it could then be read that traditional cooking method is a barbecue, in which case you'd have to have the barbecue 3 metres from a house or a fence. So to tighten that up, we've taken...
Sorry, I didn't
cooking
get, I didn't get that start again.
When we came to the council meeting with the statement of proposal, councillors requested that the wording using a traditional cooking method be removed from that definition. So we did so. Having looked at it with the feedback we've had through the submission process, it's shown that that's caused confusion and people therefore think that traditional cooking fire includes a barbecue. And if it's including a barbecue, that means when you go down to clause 5.2, barbecues would need to be 3 metres from a house or a fence. So to clarify and prevent any further confusion, we've put those words back into that definition, and that's covered off in the report.
Right.
Pass.
A barbecue is not considered a traditional cooking method at the moment.
Pardon?
A barbecue is not a traditional cooking.
Is not a traditional, it's not included in the definition.
Maybe in 100 years' time, it may be considered traditional, but at the moment, it's not. Traditional is, by definition,
But
Well, the
but
definition's
I'm
there.
sort of thinking you're talking about how close something can be to a structure, is that right? I mean,
So the definitions help us understand what is intended under each clause.
yeah.
Where we get confusion, if you take out the words using traditional cooking methods from the definition of traditional cooking fire, when you come down to clause 5.2, people then start getting confused about what is and is not allowed within 3 metres of a property, and whether that's reasonable or not. 3 metres of a house or a fence
Or a tree.
or a tree.
I was addressing submission feedback. Submitters raised this point specifically.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Maybe I'm a
Councillor
really
Wilson.
slow learner, but I am correct in saying this would not stop somebody who's got a brazier or an oven, a block oven that's made out, that is outside for the purpose of cooking food, that happens to be within 3 metres of a house.
Pizza oven.
Correct.
Great,
Yeah, like a pizza oven.
because otherwise I'd have to move to 5.
Are there any further questions?
I just have a further one if I
Your
may.
worship?
Yeah, 7.4. I think the intention of 7.4 is about the ability of the council to recover costs for any costs incurred in actioning this bylaw, is it? Even though it's under the extinguished fire, which we're not going to be doing because the fire service is going to be extinguishing the fires. Is that really what that means? I think it is, eh?
I agree, reading
Yeah.
through.
I think it's in the wrong
187,
place, isn't it?
I think it needs clarification.
Because councillor King raises a good point. If we're not going to extinguish fires, then we can't claim any costs for something we're not going to do. But I think we're wanting to ensure that we can recover any costs
In relation to the
in relation to the action. Yep. So I think it's in the wrong place.
We'll have a close look at that.
Yeah.
Councillor
Yeah,
Toomey?
Madam Chair, 7.4 to me looks as though, say for example, there's a fire which a fire truck cannot get to in the middle of a paddock where there's a swamp and all that sort of stuff, and they may have to get a helicopter or something like that. Would this here be the case?
Our enforcement officers need to
Yeah.
get out of the helicopter themselves and extinguish the fire.
And
Yes.
parachute down.
Would this here be the case whereby the hireage of the helicopter could then be requested? That's the way I see it.
I would think so, yeah.
A rather extreme example, but
Yes.
a good example. Right, Councillor Pascoe?
And could I just extend that, because if the bylaw is silent on that, and a fire has been lit and does require a helicopter, and there is the possibility that the offender may be insured, I'm quite serious about this, that if the bylaw is silent, then we might have difficulty, or they might have difficulty in recovering from the insurance company because there's no provision for anyone to be charged for that extra cost. So by having some clause in there allows us to charge, means that the insurance company might have to cough up.
Are you with us? Yes. Good.
But it may be that the wording might, but I mean the word may is in there, it's very clear, which means that it's not an automatic charge, it's one that might be taken in the context of Councillor Tooman's helicopter having to spend a day or two flying water over the paddock to put the fire out.
Right, thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you have a question?
It was a question around 7.4, when it says the council may recover, would it be correct to say the council may not? In other words, it could recover, or it could decide it doesn't want to. So it seems quite open.
The GM has said yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes. To be used in appropriate circumstances if necessary.
Okay. So we do have a motion and a on the table, and Councillor King, you have an amendment. So we'll deal with your amendment. What is your amendment? Up there. Is that correct?
Yes.
And does Councillor King have a seconder for his amendment? Councillor Mallet is seconding that.
Just in terms of the motion is subject to some of the word clarity and in fact placement of 7.4 and its wording, right? Is that's
So,
correct,
well,
right?
not at this
Is it-
stage.
well,
Councillor
that's my
Wilson,
question,
yeah.
isn't, because there are some
Yeah.
wording issues here.
Yeah, so Councillor Wilson, would you look at picking that up, subject to minor edit?
Absolutely. So my understanding was staff have some time to be able to try to rework the wording
So I think it's probably
before it
amendment
comes
to
back
wording
for.
C.
So, Julie, would you like us
Recommended
to put?
changes?
Well, I'm just saying it is,
changes.
I might need to
Yeah.
say
To reflect
that,
that?
say that, yeah.
All right, so
The GM might be able to help us here,
we throw an E in.
or in C.
It's part of point C there, Councillor Wilson. So I think it's just subject to the minor changes raised at the committee meeting.
Minor wording.
Minor wording changes
Minor wording.
to be presented to the council meeting on 26th of February.
Haven't we had the 20th?
Yeah, we have.
We've had the 20th of
26th
February.
of February.
No,
So
26th.
should we try the 26th?
What did I say?
You said
The
26th.
20th.
No, that's 26th.
Did you?
You did.
You did?
Turn your urinator.
No, I've got a policeman next to me.
Okay,
Said
so
he
we've
said
got the motion is, Your Worship, that captures your concern?
I'm just
Didn't give us-
Yep.
didn't
All
give us
right,
ability.
can we move down to the amendment? Thank you. All right, so we'll open that up for debate. Councillor King, did you want to speak to your amendment?
Yes. I don't know how moving 7.4 anywhere in this report makes any difference. It says, where an authorised officer has extinguished a fire pursuit of clause 7.2, the council may recover any costs incurred. Council may recover any costs incurred in extinguishing the fire from the person to whom the direction was made. Now, this has gone out to public consultation, and the note clearly says the function of extinguishing fires under 7.2 is delegated to the New Zealand Fire Service. They're in charge of the operation. They're the ones who call in help. And calling in, this is Hamilton. This isn't the Wairarapa, or this isn't, we don't live in the bush. We live in the city. I just can't see how moving that around somewhere else in a report reads any different. And I believe that changing the wording then alters the document, and which has been out to public consultation. I struggle with that. It's very clear to me, the reading of what 7.4 means. And the note is part of we've established a note as a part of the document. And 5.1D to me is us again picking up the responsibility of regional council, and regional council's rules are very clear here as to what you can burn and what you can't burn. It's all laid out here. We shouldn't be enforcing their bylaw. They should enforce their own bylaw. We shouldn't be picking up somebody else's responsibility. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any further speakers on the amendment? There being none, I'll put the amendment. Those in favour? Jude, did you get that?
Councillor Mallet and Councillor King for the amendment.
And those against, please raise your hands.
councillors Wilson, Tooman, Worship the Mayor, Pascoe, Gallagher, Yong, Chesterman and Madam Chair against the motion. It's lost.
The amendment is lost. Thank you. And so we will move to the motion. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, would you like to speak to your motion?
No. No, thank you,
It's all very polite, isn't it? Are there any speakers to the motion?
Madam Chair. I know you like to be, sorry, I forgot.
It's actually in standing orders, Councillor Wilson.
Is it?
Yeah. So there being no
Yeah,
speaker.
I'll speak to it.
Councillor King?
I'm speaking against this motion. Recently, council reversed out of a bylaw, a fire bylaw. Several of the councillors who are in this room were a part of that at the time. Since then, we've had dry summers. There's no evidence been presented that there is a need for this bylaw from an evidential point of view. It's purely emotional. We've got Taupo 2 hours down the road whose population swells to 80,000 people in the summer. They have a paid fire service like we have, and they don't have a bylaw in place. Yes, they're not a city, but they're similar to what we are in the summer when this bylaw comes in or is required. We keep getting told that this bylaw isn't going to affect our braziers, barbecues and traditional cooking fires, but under clause 5.1, a neighbour could ring the New Zealand Fire Service if there was smoke or odour from their barbecue, brazier or traditional cooking fire. If the smoke or the odour goes over the fence, the fire brigade have to attend. They don't have a choice. If they felt that there was an issue, they would ask you to put the fire out. If you didn't, you would be liable for prosecution, and if convicted, up to a $20,000 fine. This bylaw, in effect, is more red tape. It's making it more expensive to live in our city, and in this case, it's giving third parties a right to enter your property uninvited. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So the motion is now put. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Hand.
Councillors Wilson, Tooman, who worship the Mayor, Councillor Pascoe, Gallagher, Yong, Chesterman and Madam Chair for the motion.
And those against.
Councillors King and Mallet against the motion.
Right, thank you. Thank you. Right, we move on to item 15, the Community Assistance Policy on page 229. Deanne and Lance, thank you, welcome. You can take the report as read.
Happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. And this is the work of Councillor Yung. You were the chair on the group tasked with looking at this policy. Did you have any comments that you wanted to make at the beginning?
I just want to move the recommendation.
Okay, yep.
Yep.
Second.
So move Councillor Yung and seconded from Councillor Gallagher. Now, are there any questions? Councillor Mallet, and then your worship.
Just a couple. On the executive summary, page 229, excuse me, point number 6 talks about identifying the efficiency and cost effectiveness of delivering the service. So presumably the new policy you're putting forward has identified some efficiencies and cost effectivenesses. Can you give examples?
If I may, through the chair, the review of the community assistance funding's been a one-year work program for my team, and since coming on board in 2012 and taking over the community assistance funding program, there have been a number of changes to the policies and how we actually deliver the program within council. So from 2012 to the current time or now, there have been a number of tweaks with the way that we deliver the program, bringing on board the online Smarty Grants application, which has reduced administratively the time for my team to actually deliver the program, and it's also reduced the amount of community hours from community organisations who've actually supported the organisation and the effective allocation of the community assistance funding over that period of time. I think working through with the working group during last year of 2014, you know, there's been a number of numerous discussions around what should be changed with the program, and I think where we've come to today that there are some efficiencies that we have saved. So in terms of delivering the quantum amount that council have agreed to, comes at a cost of $86,000, which includes one FTE and $22,000 towards the Smarty Grants online administration fee.
Sorry, what was the figure? 86?
86,000, and so that's a cost of one FTE to deliver the program and administer that, and that also includes the registration cost for the online Smarty Grants, which we have to pay for the online platform.
Okay. So from that I got, there was the Smarty Grants was the key issue,
Yes.
is that right? And that enabled you to drop your administration costs of the grants.
That's correct, administratively. Yep. So if you'll remember through the working group, Councillor
Yep, I
Mallett,
remember chatting. Yep.
the administration to deliver the program prior to the online platform coming on board did require a number of my staff, a number of elected members to be part of that process, as well as community membership to be part of that process in terms of assessing and allocation of that funding. So we've managed to reduce the number of hours of not only staff time but also community people who've contributed to that process.
All right. So it would be useful to know kind of like a ratio of expenses to administer the grants divided by the value of the grant, the total funding, you know, for a later date.
So it's $86,000 for administration, and we're administering $1.2 million worth of grants.
And previously, what was the cost?
I think
was more.
Yeah, it was over 120 something thousand.
All right.
If you added up all the other staff hours and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. And on point 8, you say supplementary to the community assistance policy, both the single year and multi-year grants have been clearly defined funding guidelines and criteria to enable. What are those clearly defined guidelines? They're in.
So they're in the attachments that you've received as part of that. If you've read the information of what the criteria and guidelines were before in the policy, it was quite wordy and quite cumbersome. So we've tightened on that as part of the feedback that we've received as part of the working group.
So on page 2, in our agenda, page 235, we talked about who can apply, ineligibility, all applications must be accompanied by. So that's the qualification guidelines?
So the criteria and guidelines helps provide direction and to staff, as well as those who are applying to the fund, as well as the allocation committees. If you read the policy, it actually clearly defines what the eligibility criteria is in terms of what applications we wouldn't accept or what types of groups we wouldn't accept as part of applying to those funds.
Dee, is that the stuff on page 235? Oh, you might know.
We've got loose copies.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. It has headlines, who can apply, ineligibility, all
you've got
applications
the
must...
criteria, yeah, 235.
So those 5, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Your Worship?
A couple of things about the structure of the policy. The guidelines and criteria attachments, which I thought was really clear and good, they don't actually contain the criteria that's in the policy. Now, and there are some words in the criteria that aren't in the policy, so I wondered if there needs to be some consideration to one or the other or both but the same. I think it's probably important to put it in the policy. So So I'm not sure where that fits. Secondly, I did wonder whether some of the process stuff in the policy shouldn't be in the policy and should just be in the guidelines, because the processes, and they're repetitive. 1.3, some of those are already in the guidelines. Didn't think they were necessary. Thirdly, but the more important issue, I guess, is it's been raised, I think, with a couple of us about the ability for organisations which have to date received more than $5,000 in a single grant, and those are predominantly in the arts sector, that the new way of approaching the grants will mean that they will not be able to receive a grant over $5,000. And how...
Unless it's a multi-year grant.
Yes, but I'm not sure if that's clear enough, particularly for those in the arts sector that may have been applicants and received funding under the previous arts.
Under the arts and culture and
yes,
performing arts and
yes.
festival funds.
So there seems to be a view that they won't be able, some of those organisations that, for example, have had $20,000 or $30,000 won't be able to do that anymore. So I think there needs to be some clarity given around that, so that the public, particularly the arts sector, understand how this works. Okay, so I'm not sure how that can be done, but I think that needs to be made clear, and perhaps that's some engagement with Creative Waikato and some, putting of information out. And the media's here today, and I guess they can have a role in giving some clarity around that. Because the streamlining of the process that we discussed in the working group was not to shut out those sorts of organisations, and in fact to give them more certainty around how, about funding. Yeah, so it's a better position for them. Okay. So I'm not sure how to approach just some of the kind of structural issues in the policy and the marrying up of some, because I think there's got to be some consistency here, otherwise it's going to be a bit confusing. So I think it needs a bit of a rework.
If I could just follow on from Her Worship, I have some reservations as well. This is the first time we've seen the full deal, the full proposal, and I just wanted to ask, and I do have some concerns around those types of events that we have supported over time missing out. How will the allocation committee make the balance between the different events? So, I mean, it says that you'll go to the criteria and the guidelines, but there's nothing in the policy or the guidelines that I saw that will ensure for the city and for council that we get an even spread of events, of community events, of theatre, of performing arts. And while I notice now that elected members are proposed to be on those that allocation committee, I guess if it was weighted with outside members from the community, as opposed to, I don't know, community services areas as opposed to performing arts area, you know what I'm saying? There's some nervousness for me around how the allocation committee will balance, because there's nothing in the guidelines or the criteria or the policy to ensure that. It's just up to the heads around the table.
So if I may, through the chair, there's two separate allocation committees that were approved back in 2012. One for the single year grant, which has a collection of community sector representatives. That includes Māori, Pacific Island, the arts sector, so a whole cross-section of community that is sit as part of that allocation committee, and that's supported also by Councillor Young and Councillor Gallagher. And then there, for the large grants or the multi-year grants, that allocation committee actually consists of all the key funders within the city, and also does include the arts sector sitting as part of that, and also supported by Councillor Gallagher as part of that. So there's always going to be a level of contention around a contestable fund where basically applications who meet our funding criteria and guidelines apply to the fund, and ultimately we have a limited quantum, and that is going to be up to the allocation committee around providing a balanced view on how our funding is actually allocated across all of those sectors that you did mention. Because we do realise that that is
I clearly understand that, but I'm not comforted by any other guideline or any criteria to ensure that that's going to happen. Why did the working group, or did the working group, I guess, consider categories within the two funds? You know, a portion will go to events and a portion for community and whatever else. And if they did, why did they reject that idea? What were the reasons?
If I may, through the chair, there was lots of discussion around how the funding would be, A, the quantum, B, whether we're in the business or not.
Yeah.
And once the quantum was actually determined, as the discussions progressed over that year, the decision was actually made by the working group to actually consolidate the single year fund. So it just becomes a contestable fund. So not specifically tagged to any sector, which is what we primarily had before, because what that meant in terms of administering those funds was there was separate allocations and processes around that. So the decision on the working group was to consolidate that single year fund and condense them down into one pool of funding, make it contestable across all the sectors. So that actually opens it up for any sector or any particular group to actually apply to that funding.
So again, I understand that. Are you confident, can you give me assurance then that, and I'm just using these purely as an example, say a neighbourhood house wants to do a great project in the community, and that's going to be weighted and evaluated against, say, a local theatre company putting on an amazing show that's going to be at Founders. Can you assure me that the policy and the guidelines are going to help the allocation committee properly weigh that up and carefully weigh that up? Because those are two. In the past, it's been performing arts. It's been this show or this performance or that performance, and same for community. So there was some assurance for those groups. There isn't that now. There might be an environment project competing against Mamma Mia or something. Are you absolutely 100% confident that this new policy will manage that fairly and equitably?
If I may, through the chair, I'm confident that the processes that we have in place, the policy and the guidelines will guide that. The allocation committee will actually guide that as well. What I would say with contestable funding is that there will be winners and losers, and that's the nature of the beast of what we're looking at. So ideally we would like to fund everybody, but groups or applications need to meet our criteria. If the information is lacking in their application when they're putting it through the online smarting, that will bounce them out straight away.
I've sat on many, I know how they work.
So, I mean, ultimately, I've got confidence in the process that we've got and the guidelines that we've got, and that there'll be some equity across there. But I'm also honest in the fact that there will be some winners and losers in this, and we will manage that.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Just one last question. On the allocation committee, it says on page 234 under 1.4, it says the allocation committee/committees will have a staff member present as an ex officio member. Is that staff member, do they have voting rights?
No.
They don't, okay.
Perhaps it'd be paid just to put a bracket non-voting. That's a good point, Madam Chair.
Your Worship?
Sorry to come back in.
Yeah.
Just about, if I may, and I'm sure Councillor Young would also endorse those. There was seen as an inequity across the sectors with the old regime, to be frank, and the idea of consolidating down was to give more equity across the various sectors. With for example, you know, environment had a $10,000 fund and arts had a $100,000 fund. So what I'm saying is that putting them all together enabled a competent selection panel to balance up that equity and assess on a case-by-case basis the merits of all applications. I thought, and I think that was sound. I do think, I'm not comfortable, to be honest, with approving this policy today, and I am going to move a motion to not accept the policy today. And the reason I'm going to do that, if there's a seconder, is not because I don't think the policy's right and the underpinnings, I agree with all of that. I just think the wording needs a little bit more work. And I think the unit manager summed it up very well, that it's a sensitive area because there's contestability. And the public is looking for guidance and the sectors are looking for guidance, and I think many of the councillors have had communications already about nervousness about how we're approaching this. And I think it's quite important that the wording is really clear. And also, I think, Chair, I think there is some additional wording that could help satisfy some of these queries that we are getting and that you have raised. Now, Councillor Young might have a view on that. I'm just trying to be constructive here. But
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Young and Councillor Geller have moved and seconded the motion. So Her Worship's would be an amendment, unless you're happy to.
I'll bow to my chair.
Yeah.
We're happy to withdraw the motion.
Yes,
and
I think that's a good idea,
So through the chair to Her Worship, it's what you're sort of proposing is a sort of a sit again, which gives us more time to clarify
no,
some of the detail.
I think what I'm saying is that I think some of the points raised just mean that the policy wording needs to have a bit of a relook and pick up some of these comments. And I do know that some of the arts community and other communities have been giving some feedback about, you know, nervousness around what it all means. And I think perhaps if we bring this policy back to the next committee date, it might just give time for that just to kind of get fleshed out.
I'd just like to clarify. So the Creative New Zealand funding is not included in this one, right?
No, that's
totally separate. That's
105,000. So that's
105,000,
delivered through Creative Waikato.
That's for us.
I think, Your Worship, I think that's an excellent idea. And
I'm
so
happy just to, if these
They're happy
guys
to
are withdrawing,
withdraw.
I would just move that the report be received and that the community assistance policy be reported back to the next strategy and policy committee meeting. And that's all as simple as that.
Because the 8th of April. Is that going to work?
Could I just ask for clarification of the point that you brought up, Madam Chair? Was for the single year grants, you had some concern about the maximum grant being $5,000.
That was me. Yeah, that was.
Oh, sorry, Your Worship. Is that something which the members want us to bring back? So is it an increased sum? I think, Your Worship, you brought up the point that some people apply for.
Yes, well, I mean, there's been feedback given in the interim, and I'm sure you've received it too. I know Dee will have. Just about where that fits now. It might be that the working group that's been working on this and doing a really good job, I think,
it's been
might
a
need
tough
to
one.
have another meeting just to kind of bring all that together.
Yes.
Does,
idea.
So
Quite a few of us sit on that.
Question in terms of the process, initially it gives Councillor Young the right to pull that working group together once he's had an interaction with Lance and Deanne, you know, in terms of the clarification, and I think we'd leave it then to Councillor Young to exercise discretion as to whether that group gets pulled together, because obviously in April it would be very desirable because of timelines to actually get the thing dusted.
Great idea. So, Councillor Young, are you happy to second that motion?
Yep, I'll second that.
All right. I think that's a great idea. Democracy, are you clear on that motion? Yep. That's A and B and attached to B, followed to B, be reported back to the 8th of April 2015 Strategy and Policy Committee meeting. All right. Is there any debate on that? Councillor Mallett?
Just to say that I'll be supporting the motion, but not for the reason that was given. I don't think that the council should be in the business of community grants. This is forced charity. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is a million miles away from the core services that the council should be delivering. To take money away from the people of the city to give it to these groups just makes us look like heroes when it's not our money at all. So won't be supporting it. What we're doing, and this is just a good example of, we're spending $86,000 to take money off people, then to try and allocate it to people. And the difficulty we're having is the fact that it is because it is not a core service that you run into all these, how on earth do we assess one versus the other? And that is because it is miles away from the service we should be providing our community. So I will be supporting the motion, but not for the reason everyone else is.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mallett. Any further debate? Your Worship, would you like to speak to the motion? All right, so that motion will be put. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Any against? None against. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to the Councillor Young, your chairing, and to those members, Councillor Gallagher, who worship Forsyth and Mallett, and Councillor Pascoe. It's been a hard road, that one. It's been a tough one. We're nearly there. Right, item 16, social housing strategy, 237. Right, can take that report as read. And this is just about the process, isn't it?
I'll move.
The housing strategy. Who got there first? Councillor Tooman. So moved by Her Worship the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Tooman. Is there any questions? Councillor Pascoe, question?
Yeah, just a question. I didn't see anywhere in the report mention of the Bryant Trust being involved in this group, and just the recollection that the Bryant Trust did come during the submission process on social housing to indicate that either we hadn't finished our earlier task, or if we had, that they were quite keen to be involved going forward with completion of this policy. So I just wanted clarification that they had been or are involved in this.
So if I may, through the chair, DV Bryant Trust have been involved in the previous discussions before Christmas. And just recently, well, this week actually, we've just received the email around the coordination of the social housing sector and pulling together that group of who the membership will be in terms of moving this plan forward.
Great.
Of which DV Bryant have been part of those discussions.
Thank you.
Thank
Question, Councillor Gallagher.
So I take it, obviously, apart from our representatives, the other membership's sort of kind of been finalised, is that right?
It's still being finalised at this point in time, so we're trying to pull together a date that's been circulated amongst all the members who've been asked by the social sector to attend. So once that date's confirmed, then the discussion will be had, and then confirmation of who's actually sitting as part of that governance group will be confirmed.
Thank you. Any further questions? Right, that's been, where am I? Oh, moved by Her Worship the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Tooman. Any debate? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? That's been carried. Thank you. Right. Next item, page 240, Central City Safety Plan Update. Welcome, Calvin and Brian, back to the hot seat.
Thank you, Madam
Page
Chair.
240.
This is, it's really good actually to present this. This is the first 6 monthly report on the safety plan. I reckon it's really good what's been achieved here. There's a little summary table that's set out that gives you a nice sense of progress. We're developing metrics around this as time goes on, because some of these measures are relatively complex in terms of the outcomes we're trying to achieve, but the team on working on it, Ian, Calvin and Leanne from the Mayor's office have done a fantastic job, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Right, any questions? Councillor Mallett.
Just wonder, what you said you've done a really good job and you're really pleased to be reporting. What are the measurements you've got 30 people housed and so, what are how are you measuring, how are you assessing a success or failure or otherwise?
That's sort of the broader determination, I guess, is still being worked on. What these...
What gives you grounds to say you think things are going really well? What are you basing that on?
I'm basing it on the number of actions that are listed down here and the progress that's been made against them. So the plan sets out a number of actions. Those actions line up with the outcomes that it's seeking to achieve, and that's what we're reporting on. As I mentioned, we're further refining those measures to make them as meaningful as possible, but this is a really good start. Some of this is quite a hard area to measure progress on, and I'd like to suggest to any councillors that have been down have seen quite a massive difference in the feel and the ambience of the central area in terms of safety. It's been really quite a remarkable shift already, and a number of these are quite measurable, I guess you could say, Councillor Mallett, in terms of the changes that have occurred. Others are probably a little bit more subtle, and over time will show up. So I think it's a really good start.
And if I may add further to Brian's comments, that there is as part of the plan, there is some baseline data that's been captured, and it is too early in the implementation phase of the plan to clearly provide some evidence of how we're tracking. So that information is still being collated at the moment.
Okay.
But we are very confident in terms of where things are heading, in terms of the ambience and some of the outcomes there. So I think in our next report back in 6 months, we will have more information to be able to provide some of that detail that you're
Thank you.
requesting.
How are you tracking against your budget?
Yeah, we're going all right, thanks.
So all smirks aside, how are you tracking against your
We're
budget?
tracking against our budget.
What are you? I don't know if you're treating this seriously. Are you tracking against your budget, and how are you tracking against your budget?
It's a cross-organisational project. A lot of progress is made by using existing budgets. There's some capital for existing cameras. By and large, we're on target with our tasks, and we're going on target with our budget.
So
There's
your
no-
budget is 314,000 for the year, I assume. How much of that have you spent?
That budget is allocated to the city safety patrol. But if I may, through the chair, all of the actions, bar the ones with the relationships with the external stakeholders who are responsible for some areas of the plan to be delivered, it is business as usual, and everything's been delivered within existing budgets.
So how much of the 314 has been spent?
That relates to the city safety area. So it's just the year-to-date allocation. I can't tell you exactly where we are month to date, but it's on target. One of the things we're wanting to do, though...
You do have the ability to measure how much you've spent.
Yeah, we can bring that back to you if you want that additional information.
Well, that's,
So
the, question,
actually-
that's the question I asked.
Sorry, Councillor Miller, as Deputy Chair of the Finance Committee, you have full oversight of city safety budgets, and this is an update on a strategic plan, not a budget meeting. So you have access to all of that information. So can you
You're not happy with me asking that question?
Can you keep your... Well, I'm just saying...
I'm asking a reasonable
No,
valid question.
I'm
It's
talking...
part of the
Councillor
report,
Mallett,
yes.
I'm sorry, just let me finish. The staff presenting the report have said they haven't got that information here today. They can't give it to you, and I'm just saying that, just as the staff have said, that kind of information goes through the finance company. So you're not going to get that at this meeting. Keep your questions to the report, which is a 6-monthly update report on a new strategy.
The budget figure is mentioned in the report,
Yep.
and perhaps I was confused.
But your question can't be asked today.
Yeah, well, perhaps I was confused because the first answers I got were, we're going okay to budget.
Well,
And
I'm sure they would know if they weren't.
And okay, then if you're going okay to budget, how far have you gone? So you answered you were going okay. Presumably you knew what you were saying when you said that.
Well, yeah, I think I did. What I'm trying to explain is there are a whole pile of actions here from across a whole lot of areas of the business, and a big part of this plan is being delivered from within current budgets. There are some specific identified capital budgets for the cameras, and there's some other operational budgets, largely for the city safe patrols. They've been very easy to isolate and identify. One of the things we're working on, as I mentioned, is developing and pulling together better metrics and measures across this whole area, because it covers so many areas. And one of the things I want to do is try and gather up all of the budgets involved, so we've got a composite situation that's really clear and pulls from all the different areas that are contributing. That's going to take a little bit of time to put together, but we're going on track.
Would you not expect it normal to be able to answer that question, though, to have those figures when you come to the council?
It's a work in progress.
Everything's a work in progress, Brian.
Oh, yeah. Councillor King?
Are cameras getting cheaper with technology moving on and time moving on?
Yes, they generally are, and they're getting more sort of flexible and, you know, more able to sort of interoperate. So that's generally the case. The resolutions are improving, the capability are improving, and the technology is reducing the cost.
Are we using wireless yet, or are we still on cable?
We're on yeah, there's still a combination, and the new technology shifting over as cameras are replaced.
Just one question on page point 10, the last bullet point. There is continuous positive feedback about the gardens in Civic Square and the contribution that makes to the look of the public space. Can you just elaborate on that? There must be something I'm missing. I just don't understand why that's in this report.
So the feedback that we're receiving from the business owners and visitors to the space has been positive around the garden plantings within the Civic Square and the value that that adds to the overall ambience of that space.
So is that part of the Central City Safety Plan?
It is.
Right through the city, the gardens,
within the CBD
yeah. Thank you.
Right, any further questions? Councillor Tooman?
Yeah, just a couple of questions, if I may, Madam Chair. On page 243, 243, the second red box is concerning the effectiveness of the truancy program. Have we still got truancy officers employed by MOE in the city, or
no,
they've gone?
If I may, through the chair, there has been some changes that MOE's implemented in the delivery of the truancy program here in the Waikato. So it is now one provider that is being contracted to provide a service for recidivist truants and their families. So it's working with that high-risk families and high-risk young people in that space. So long gone are the days of having truancy officers that walk around the whole central area. So some responsibility, or most of the responsibility, has been put back to schools around how they manage truancy within their own schools and then accessing that service. So it is off track because it has been a challenge to get some additional information or further information from MOE around that.
But no doubt perhaps Calvin, you could answer this one, is your safety officers, if they see a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old wandering around during school time, they can give them the message, I presume.
You certainly have the opportunity to, yes.
And just adding to it, from my perception, I think it's a look and feel, and that's pretty important as to the real world is what people perceive it to be, I think. And out there at the moment, I think perception is that, things are reasonably good, so well done.
I just have a question for Calvin. I know that the HCBA has certainly struggled over the last, I don't know how many years, and many meetings, desperate meetings and desperate times with the General Manager, Sandy Turner, and myself and the Mayor, and the Mayor's office trying to, try and console and help, really. I haven't heard from Sandy for quite some time now. Anecdotally, I'm taking that as a good thing. Are you receiving good feedback from the association?
I actually have a regular meeting with Sandy, and things working out very well. And Her Worship the Mayor and I were both guest speakers at the Business After 5 meeting run by the HCBA earlier this month.
and that was well received by their members?
I believe so, yes.
A big change, Your Worship, to one of the first ones you spoke to there before the plan, I would imagine?
Yes, true, that would be a fair comment, Chair. I think several comments I'd make. People are very pleased that we're doing something, that we're actually doing something to try and address the concerns. Number two, there is a score on the board, and people can see that. And I think it's early days yet. I think you heard the General Manager say that we've only just got into this. And the key will be in the metrics that they're developing up to measure success, really. And part of that will be stats, and part of that will be people's own views and feelings about the spaces. And I think the next report will be really a key one, won't it? Because they will have been going for some time. So this, I guess, is just a, you know, a sort of a lead-in one, really. But yeah, I think people are feeling good, aren't they? That there is definitely some changes. Yeah.
Right. So do we have a mover for the report? Councillor Tooman, and seconded by. I'm happy to second that. Is there any debate? Councillor Gallagher?
Picking up on what Her Worship says, obviously, good report, and obviously you do your best. Certainly, I think in terms of Garden Place as the beating hub of the city and all of that stuff, be really interested. And I suspect there's small gains, step forward, a bit of a step back. So I think I don't know if we've got it, you know, right. You know, I mean, I suspect in the end we may have to go into some beyond the horizon, further lateral thinking in terms of trying to get Garden Place as a space that we ultimately want. But I acknowledge that you're doing your best. But all I'm saying is I'm really, obviously, I think we'll be really interested in your views. And as I've said before, I acknowledge, Governor, your own expertise along with Leo and others. So I really think we've got a good, what's the word, skill base along with our other team. And we'd really be interested in hearing your own and be open to innovative ideas. And I think kind of that's where the Mayor's going a little bit, is to just have an open mind of where we go in some of these public spaces to try and achieve what we want.
Great. Thank you. So that's been moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? No, that's carried. Thanks. Thank you. Right, item 18, page 244, Strategic Roundup Report. Leah, that's your one.
I think
Take
actually,
the report as read.
I think we take the report as read. It's probably a combination of myself,
Of you and
Brian, and Chris to respond to any
Yep.
questions.
So any questions on this report? I'm happy to move. Councillor Gallagher?
Yes, I think just it's a good report, compliments. I may comment at the end. Just some questions around item 16. Additionally, HUC wishes to facilitate growth in the Peacocks area, and Waikato District may come under pressure to extend the rural residential zone to allow more commercial development within the Tamahiri as part of their district plan review. Bearing in mind that the conversation will start to happen, in my view, sooner than later. In fact, the Tamahiri area eventually should become part of the Hamilton jurisdiction because of community of interest. Is there anything you want to add to that? Because obviously it seems to me we've got our LTP, as I've said, we're looking at our major growth cells, but obviously we want to be right across what's happening there, Cambridge and other places where people would live, work and buy property, etc. So I don't know if you've got anything you want to add to that?
Thank you very much for the question. It's just really keeping a very close eye on the pressure that's always in that locality. And initially it's through the future-proof arrangement and making sure Waikato District, if you like, complies with the agreed strategy. And it's just been signalled here as perhaps a little bit of a risk to Hamilton because they're going through a planning change at the moment, and there'll be probably new pressure to have changes in those areas. So we've just sort of highlighted it as something in particular we'll keep a close eye on.
So you have a keen and, I mean, obviously it's a case of something that is directly impacts on us. 100% community of interest with Hamilton, we have no jurisdiction, zero. But and I'm not being critical of the district council but obviously I just flag as an elected member, I really want some very, I'm sure you will keep us updated, and obviously we clearly will obviously have a view in that area.
Thank you.
Just further questions under item 51, governance. This work stream is on holding pending the outcome of the other work streams. When do you think they'll start governance?
My understanding is that when the spatial plan work stream has progressed, then this work stream will start to come on.
Okay, so that's my understanding. Just confirming we're on the same wavelength there. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mallett?
Can you just expand on what governance means there?
I think it refers to
merging the groups together.
I think it refers to some of the bigger issues that Councillor Gallagher was referring to earlier, some of the more macro issues facing council's boundaries. Should we be standing back and looking at the region through a more simplified lens? And the spatial plan, I guess, will give us information to help that discussion. So
Councillor Mallett, given that Councillor Gallagher and I go to the spatial plan meeting, the answer to that question is governance, as in council governance of the Waikato region. That's what that project is.
Okay, with all due respect, that doesn't tell me anything. I know what governance means, but I mean, in this context, is it alluding to potential mergers? Is it alluding to what is
amalgamation and reorganisation?
So it's those issues.
Yes.
Right. And what are you expecting to come out of it? Is that
Well, nothing yet, because the spatial plan work is going to be completed before that discussion is had.
Right, Councillor Pascoe?
Yes, follow on question to Councillor Gallagher's on the enlarging of the city, I guess, to include Tamahiri and so forth. Is it realistic, Brian, to assume that if those areas became part of the city, there would be significant infrastructure investment required by Hamilton City Council to adequately service those areas as city areas, as opposed to the sort of rural residential that they currently are?
It would depend really if they went further in terms of the intensity of development. At the moment, because of the sort of rural residential areas, they operate off septic tanks. They have contributing town water supply on trickle feed. The roads are designed effectively to service that sort of rural residential form of development. If it was to go to more of a full urban type development, then there would be very significant issues for whoever was going to have to service that. I think the question would remain, would that ever happen, and is it likely to happen? But if it was to, there would be major servicing implications.
So there would be quite significant challenges around where we might find that capital to fund that, given the significant and robust debates we've had in recent weeks about funding our existing area that's defined as Hamilton City Council.
Yeah, the challenge would be the community desire to change that from a very desirable rural residential area effectively to more of an urban community. I don't think that desire's there. But if it was, the way probably would be sort of to identify those as special rating areas, and the development in that area would have to fund it. The challenge here would be simply the dollars we're talking about would be huge.
Thank you.
I think just further to the point, our experience in the two areas that have come to the city of recent times, the level of service that the city provides is generally higher than those of the areas that they have currently receiving under those councils. And we know from experience in those other areas, and I'm talking Templeview and the Ruakura to Rapa North, that the costs significantly outweigh the revenue that we acquire through the rating.
Question.
Councillor Gallagher.
That whether or not local authority A or local authority B have it in its jurisdiction is a totally separate question. Dunedin, Christchurch, Auckland, if you look at the Auckland plan, it has rural residential in its mix, except that it's able to do one decision-making process and roughly balance. I think that's, is that a fair assumption? That I think that there are two separate questions.
Yeah, I think the Auckland difference is they have a whole lot of basically community boards that are like mini councils, and so there's representative tensions in the Auckland model as well. But you know, what happens around our boundaries is the issue that we've always been concerned about, because Hamilton City is so constrained, and as we grow, it's only a matter of time before we'll need more land around us. And our concern always is to make sure when the land comes into the city, it's in good condition so we can transition it to urban. And that's why we are very interested in the fragmentation of that.
But with respect,
around Hamilton.
you can be a local authority. You don't have to be a totally urban local authority. All it means that if you're an urban rural local authority, the rural bit gets to pay for the Founders Theatre. At the moment, they don't. Is that a fair summation?
I couldn't possibly comment on
Right.
that. I think that's more of a political
Can I,
statement.
just, if I may, if I have just final question, and if the Mayor wants to pick this up, I absolutely acknowledge the vital importance of the Upper North Island Strategic Alliance. And it just says here, the UNISA mayors and chairs at a meeting discuss a strategy for engagement with central government on tourism, housing, infrastructure and transportation. Pretty high level stuff. I don't know if there's anything to add at this point, Your Worship, on that one?
No, there's nothing to add.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, so no further questions. I have moved that. Can I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor, is there any debate on this? No. Put the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Right, item number 19, page 251. Now, this is a new item, which is going to be a regular 6-monthly item, which is a report from the chairs of the subcommittees that sit under strategy and policy. And thank you to Councillor Gallagher for raising this as an issue. I think this is going to be really valuable. We'll just go through those chairs' reports. On page 252, we have the hearing subcommittee. Councillor Forsyth is not here, but she has asked me to make a change just on 3 there under the update. The hearing subcommittee continues to act as and when required. The fact that only 3 hearing dates have been called, not cancelled, over the last 6 months is a credit to staff and the policies, etc. So just change that. And she had nothing else further to add. So I will move recommendation on page 252 that the hearing subcommittee's 6-monthly report be received. Yeah, seconder? Thank you, Councillor Young. All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Great, thank you. Civil Defence and Emergency, chaired by Councillor Tooman. Would you like to speak to your report?
Yes, Madam Chair. Probably the issue which we're really facing here, of course, is that Hamilton is relatively quiet for civil defence emergencies and those type of things. So really it's trying to keep it before the community that, hey, it could happen. I'm sure that the people in Christchurch didn't think that would have happened to them just on 4 years ago last weekend.
Yeah.
One thing I think which is of importance is the way that Mystery Creek Event Centre has now come in, and their new building, which is high up on the hill there, overlooking the car park and the whole field day site, is they've actually commissioned now, so that in the event that everything in Hamilton here goes out, then we can still operate from the civil defence, from the Mystery Creek headquarters, just turn that into the civil defence headquarters. So that's very generous on their part. There is one issue which I would like to put a resolution promotion for. Currently we have 3 members of this Civil Defence Emergency Management Group, and if one person, that's elected members, and if one of those persons is unable to attend, we have to cancel that meeting, because what it is at the present time, we must have 100% attendance. So the resolution I would propose is that the quorum for the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Subcommittee be amended from 3 members to 2 members with immediate effect. Just wondering whether I have a seconder for that.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Tooman, you're adding that as a B, say, to your recommendation on 254. So will A, that the report be received, and B, and I believe you've given that motion to democracy?
Yes.
That would have to go through to the council, would it? Blair?
The advice, I have discussed this with the democracy manager, and the advice of the democracy manager was, because it was a subcommittee of this committee, it was actually within the jurisdiction of this committee, right?
Yeah.
Good to know.
Councillor Mallett?
Just a question to Leo, probably. So who are the members of that committee?
There's myself as chairperson, Councillor O'Leary and Councillor McPherson.
It's all elected members?
No, just those three on the subcommittee.
Oh, okay.
There's only three of us.
And currently you need three people, three all have to be there? Oh, okay.
Yeah. We have lost, 2 meetings? No,
Yeah,
1 meeting.
because of the quorum issue, so.
And we've lost one meeting, we've had to start another meeting late. So,
Okay. All right. Any questions on the chair's report there? Councillor King?
Yeah, probably this question's for Blair. Is that wise to have this committee so small?
I believe it works satisfactorily, and certainly we...
No, I mean with 2 people as a quorum.
Yes, I'm very comfortable that's satisfactory. It's predominantly an information and monitoring subcommittee, and I'd be very happy to have just the 2 members.
Thank you.
All right. So, so it's been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on that? No? All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. And Councillor Gallagher, Community Forum Subcommittee.
Yes, Mary, I think I don't know, has that been circulated? We'll just circulate the additional material, which just basically goes into a wee bit more detail. I'm sensitive to the hour. I do think, personally, I think it's important that subcommittees do report on a reasonably regular basis to the parent committee, and obviously retain the right to bring up key issues. I just very quickly would say that I think in terms of the Mayor's promulgation of a committee structure as per the new legislation, I hope I'm not misinterpreting her on this one, is she had a close look at the Auckland Community Forum Committee and this committee in terms of its wanting to engage with the broader community on some of the key social and issues is sort of kind of a bit model on that. And I think it takes some of the ingredients of our old Community Development Committee. And I certainly will publicly acknowledge the Mayor's idea that this committee should get out and about. And I have to say that I've become a really firm fan of that. And even though sometimes the attendances may not be massive when we're out and about, I think the fact that we sit ourselves in the Western Community Centre, we're going to the DHB Hospital, we're up at the Sport Waikato, etc., is relevant, because I think it gives a bit of a good opportunity, as they do in Auckland, to sort of see some developments and engage. And we certainly, in my view, I think one of the highlights for me was what I felt was a very positive Pacific and Ethnic Community Forum held back in October, and the supplementary report which I'm tabling gives a little bit more detail, particularly around the Pacific community, on the lookout, so to speak, and wanting to look at an appropriate community centre. But I think certainly those of us who attended that forum, for example, got a really good idea of all the positive work that is happening out there and how we can, working with agencies, improve that. The other thing I think, forward-looking, want to try and loop in probably a little bit more our Members of Parliament office, because I think in terms of some of these social issues as per the Community Forum, this is a good opportunity to at least get them or their staff to come along and sort of engage with us in a sort of a more sort of workshop session, and in a kind of a detail that we just don't obviously have time for at a meeting such as this. So I don't have anything to add to that. I think the supplementary report and the one that's been tabled is quite comprehensive, and there are links, etc., etc. I also am very happy that in those kind of meetings, the mayor of the day and the deputy mayor of the day come along. I think that does add a degree of moment. And I know that certainly when, and I don't expect them to be there all the time, but I know when they've come, that's been very much appreciated, by the community groups that we've engaged with. With your leave, Madam Chair, I'm going to, and I don't know if that flashes up on the screen, I've got a motion that's just in receiving because obviously I'll just move that the Community Forum subcommittee report be received. Mm-hmm. And then right, here we go. So if you just refer to, that the report and supplementary report tabled at the meeting from the Community Forum be received. And if I could just briefly speak to item B, this is the Strategy and Policy Committee note the staff will prepare an update report on the future use of Richmond Park School land and facilities, taking account of the current and future use of the area. And this particular issue came up at our very last meeting, so it didn't have time to be incorporated. And if you have questions, certainly ask Deanne, who gave us an update. But I think just speaking very generally, as we're aware, Richmond Park used to be Richmond Park Primary School, and if you like, that was a living, beating heart of that particular community in the Bader Street, Norrie Street area, Pine Avenue. Historically, there was public funding, including City Council contribution to the school hall, for example, and there was green space, swimming pool, the whole deal. So with the closure of Richmond Park School, we have a couple of preschool facilities there. There have been some other uses, but the MOE, Ministry of Education, and Deanne will just correct me if I haven't got quite the correct wording, if you like, are now moving on from the site. There is a potential proposal to move the school hall, etc. We heard all of this at the Community Forum in a report from Deanne, and what we wanted to do was just bring this issue to your attention and to very much note that in terms of our ongoing involvement with that neighbourhood, we wanted to be part of any discussion with other agencies as to the future of that site, and that obviously staff, through the good work of Deanne, will keep us updated. And that, I would liken it, just as we've had a strong interest in the Enderley community, this is a similar scenario in the sense that we want to make sure that all the community needs are ticked off before there's a final decisions made on the future use of that particular community space or that particular land. Just finally, the other thing I just want to do is, and I know we do this, but I do this very deliberately with intent, to Lance and Deanne and the team in community development, and also our city democracy team, I just want to say this committee has required a high degree of interaction with different community groups, setting up agendas, booking halls, all of the stuff. And I just want to say that we're really blessed in the very high quality of service that we get as elected members. So without further ado, in terms of A and B, I would so move.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher, and seconded by Councillor Young. Can I just ask Councillor Gallagher, Richard, that's the school over Glenview?
It's in it's in the Bader Street, Pine Avenue area, and I also want to acknowledge that our Deputy Chair, Philip Young, now has worked out that he's no longer on floor 6 with his desk, albeit floor 4, but he still goes down there. So when I want to find him, I go down there. But I have to say that his role, I just want to say this quite deliberately, not to stroke him and pat him on the back with respect. Don't mean that. But no, it's not appropriate. But I just want to say that Philip's been fantastic because he gives us seriously, colleagues, he gives us amazing insights in the work we do, and I acknowledge his help.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Your Worship.
Look, I just did want to make some comments about this subcommittee because I think it's doing a really good job.
Yeah.
And I think it is a good initiative to go out into the community. And I think what's happening is the word is getting out that it is a very useful forum for community groups and organisations to come and present well-researched and informative information which I've actually found very useful. So I just wanted to endorse what Councillor Gallagher had said, and I think it's in this little extra information that, you know, it's sort of got into its mojo, so to speak,
Yeah,
and I think it's functioning very, very well. Did you like that word, Councillor Gallagher, mojo?
Mojo?
Mojo, yeah.
What does it mean?
It's a very unbureaucratic word. We like that.
Yeah, but I think it actually is performing a very useful function to actually highlight some issues that are worthy of discussion. And the Richmond Park issue is one that we should look at.
And I agree
Thanks
with those
for that.
comments.
I
Your
enjoy
worship,
going
and
to them,
also,
they're good.
I thank Councillor Gallagher for making the change from Fridays, although
Yes,
I will miss
agree.
the April one, because sadly I will be on a boat with my mother that you have assured me I will enjoy.
Where are you going?
On a boat with my mother for 10 days. But I agree, Your Worship has done some fantastic work in that Richmond Park. That's a little gem, isn't it? So
And I think,
I look forward to seeing that come
we
through.
as a full council, if you recall, have attempted to do this, go out.
Yeah.
I think this is a more focused way to do that.
Agree.
And I think I see that as very much, if you like, a fine tune of what we've been doing, but this is probably a better way to do it.
Yeah, great. Right, so with that, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? That's carried. And Your Worship, you're the last one on the block there.
I don't need to speak to the report. You can take it as read, thanks, and I'm happy to move it, thanks.
Okay. And do I have a seconder for this one? Councillor King, are there any questions? No.
Oh, the business.
So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? No, that's carried. Right, item 20. We're on the home straight now. Action list for 24th of February. I just have one update there. The bottom of page 272, the second to last item, the psychoactive substances policy. You're aware that we've been trying to get this to a briefing, but we have had those taken up by LTP. I have asked staff to book in an informal briefing for the 5th of March, and Aaron's going to be sending out some information about that. Look, just somewhere in the Karaka room or something. I'm really keen on having everyone updated. So if you can make it, accept the invitation. If you can't make it, I'm happy to bring the notes and have a chat.
Is that invitation gone out?
No, not yet, no.
This is for the psychoactive substance?
Yes. Yeah, because we missed the last briefing. It was
Yes.
supposed to come to the first briefing of this year.
That's right.
So
But
that
it
will
can
be
go on a new one, can't it, by March?
a new briefing.
It can go on a
When
briefing
is the
scheduled
next
for March,
briefing?
can it?
I thought that was taken up.
The next meeting, I think, 17th of March, 16th, 17th of March. I
Can we go on
understand
that?
it's relatively heavy
I
list
don't
of items
know,
for
but
that.
can we try for that?
Yeah, rather than a
Yeah, well,
specific
I was told it was pretty packed,
It's-
so if we can try for that, absolutely.
We can certainly try for that.
Yep.
I have seen the initial list. There's quite a few things vying for a spot there.
Could I also ask about the LAP? Because we haven't signed that off, and I'm concerned about the fact that we, you know, in terms of we took public submissions. So are we doing something about that?
So, well, I had a catch up with the GM about that.
So, Your Worship, we are not far, I believe, from coming back to council to start that process again. We are just
So when you say start that process again, that's
to
not-
re-engage with council on the
Yes,
policy.
that's not another round of consultation.
No,
No.
but what we're just waiting is the outcome of the Thames Coromandel
Yep.
hearing,
Mhm.
and then we will have information from a number of different councils' policies and the process they've gone through.
But could I suggest, Chair, that given that it's been a year, it might pay to have a briefing on that before it comes
Yep.
to the council.
It wouldn't come
or the
straight to
committee, because
council.
That-
we'll need to be refreshed. and
Yeah.
also the
Absolutely.
landscape moves,
Yes, I think
so-
we would want to discuss what we know based on all that information, Your Worship.
Yep, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments on the action list? And then following that from page 262 is the status of submissions. And the bylaw review program there as well. It's just business as usual from last year.
I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor, thank you. I'm assuming there's not going to be any debate on this report. So put that to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? That's carried. Right, last item is to move into public excluded, and that is to accept minutes. Now, these minutes related back to the 19th of November minutes that were missed off the list from the beginning of the agenda. So I'll move, Deputy Mayor move, seconded by Her Worship. All those in favour? Any against? It's carried. Thank you.
So that's to move in.